Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. This is a different type of video than you normally see on the channel, and I am super excited to be doing a video like this. I'm doing this with a good friend of mine, someone who used to be on the channel very regularly when the Arc 5 manga was going on. Of course, that was like 7-8 years ago at this point, but that is Rarity Fangirl 31 VA, who I'm going to bring in just a second, and she can kind of reintroduce herself, but I'm sure some of you might remember Rarity. Rarity came to me with a great idea a few months back where she wanted to see if I was interested in going over the different pieces of Yu-Gi-Oh! Media that we've gotten over the years and just talking about why they are special to us. And I feel like that is such a great uplifting type of video, which you know I love to make here on the channel, because in one way or another, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise has touched all of us in a very, hopefully, fulfilling and nice way, and I think it has. I think if you're watching this channel and this video, this is a video that obviously interested you, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Has definitely had, hopefully, a very positive effect on your life, like it has on mine, and like it has on Rarity. And the best point of entry to start with a series like this is the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga written by Kazuki Takahashi, and we are going to do a deep dive into that manga in this video. And before we get into it, I am going to bring in the Blue Angel of the internet, as I called her the last time that we were doing a video together, and that is Rarity Fangirl. Rarity, thank you so much for joining me today.
Aw, thank you, Dylan. You're so sweet. Hello, friends. It's been a while, or if you watch my recent Vanguard video, it's been like a week or something, or whenever this video comes out. My name is Rarity Fangirl. I am a Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, fangirl of everything, or I like to call myself an overanalyzer of fictional media, as I like to call myself. You may know me as the girl who dubbed the Arc 5 manga. Yeah, that's me. Hello. That was me and my lovable Phantom crew, who I love so much. And I've been with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise since I was a little girl. I grew up initially watching Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds on TV. That was my first Yu-Gi-Oh! And eventually I learned that there's more than just the Americanized version. And it was around when Arc 5 was airing that I jumped into the fandom, and here we are. I'm back. I've made a comeback. It's been like 4 years since I've made any content, but I got into university, so deep dive in my studies. But I'm going to try to make a comeback, and this series is going to be a great way of doing that. Thank you so much for collaborating with me, Dylan. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, of course, and I'll have all of Rarity's stuff linked down below. Some really great videos on the Arc 5 manga, whether it be reviews of the later chapters or scales or fan dubs. Definitely check those out if you're a fan of Arc 5, or if you've never seen Arc 5 or read the Arc 5 manga more specifically. It's a good kind of point to enter there with those videos. Really fun stuff. So Rarity, obviously today we're going to talk about the original, the OG, the piece of media that got it all started. 8 different Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, I think probably 6 or 7 spin-off manga as well, and that is the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, done by, of course, the late, great Kazuki Takahashi. How recently have you read this manga? I guess that's a good kind of question to start us off with.
In terms of when we first got this idea, I've been rereading it for the last several months,
Okay.
but in terms of when I first read it, I think it was after I discovered the Arc 5 manga and that, oh, there are books of these, they exist. So I originally, was keeping up with the Arc 5 manga. I read 5Ds, Zale, GX, and then I went back to the original. I don't remember if that was the order. But the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, I think I actually read it before, or around the time I started, I actually worked formerly with Team Millennium, who was a group of people who dubbed the Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0, and they're still going. They're really awesome people. And I think it was through them that I really started to read the manga and realize that it's a piece of art. And Dylan, you said on your Hot Takes video that you think it was the best piece of Yu-Gi-Oh! Media. Was that just for the Hot Take video, or do you actually still think that?
No, believe it or not, that was not for the Hot Take video. I have always... Well, I shouldn't say always, but I do believe that now. So, yeah, I am with you on that. I watched the Duel Monsters anime first and then read the manga, as I think most people did. I doubt there's many people who have read the manga and then watched the show, or have only read the manga and never watched the show. I'm sure they exist, but the vast majority of people probably were introduced when they were younger with the dub, and then maybe watched the subbed as they got older, and then at that point probably read the manga. That's probably the trajectory for most people who have read everything and watched everything there is regarding the original series. Well, I'm someone who's obviously read every single Yu-Gi-Oh manga. I've watched every single Yu-Gi-Oh anime, and I truly do believe that the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga is the best piece of Yu-Gi-Oh media that I think we've ever gotten. It's better than all the anime, and it's better than all of these spin-off mangas. I do believe that, and I do believe that if it was a one-to-one creation of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga to anime, which of course, as most of us know, Duel Monsters was not really at all. There was a lot of filler. They started in the middle of the manga. We'll get into all that, but a lot of people don't even realize that there were 59 chapters of the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga that were not covered in Duel Monsters. Duel Monsters literally started, I think it was chapter 60 or around there. Which is kind of crazy to think about, but obviously that's because of the whole card game, and that's when the card game really starts to be the focal point, and they wanted to use that obviously as a selling device. But we'll get into that. Yes, I do believe, I don't know if you're in agreement with that, but I do believe the original manga is fantastic. I think it's the best piece of media in Yu-Gi-Oh!
I 1000% agree. The Yu-Gi-Oh manga, as I talked to you before we started recording, I argue is a piece of art, and that was the creation of somebody's passion and love, and of course the assistants, because most people don't, I think, know, or maybe they do now, that mangaka do not draw manga 1000% by themselves. They have assistants, they have editors, and some of you also might know one of the assistants for the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga who went on to work on Yu-Gi-Oh! R and later helped create Card Fight Vanguard, Akira Ito, start working with Takahashi as an assistant on the Yu-Gi-Oh manga. I'm not sure when he started working with them because, unfortunately, a lot of assistants aren't credited, in especially any international release, unfortunately, which is sad because they help make this work, and that's still how the system goes even today in the manga industry. If you want to learn a lot of how the manga industry works, watch Bakuman or read it. It is from the creators of Death Note. Excellent story of learning how manga works. Absolutely fantastic. But that's what I think, that there's so many people that bring this work together, which I think is very fitting because the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga story was about unity, people coming together. And I think it's kind of fitting, Dylan, that our first time collaborating in so long, we're being united. Hey, we're getting united.
Yes.
To talk about this. And yeah, I think it's a piece of art. It's not only because the visuals are striking. I'm sure Dylan's going to be showing you all some of the beautiful pieces that were in the Yu-Gi-Oh manga itself.
Absolutely.
But the entire story is such a mastercraft because I am very certain that, or rather, I don't think it's certain, and pretty much we know that I'm sure Takahashi had stuff planned for the original story, but much like a lot of Shonen Jump manga or just manga in general at the time, he was kind of, to keep the series going, it has to remain popular. So what do? You kind of have to see what people are interested in. Like, I'm pretty sure that Kaiba was supposed to be a one-off character as well as the card game, but people kept asking about him in the card game, and they're like, okay, and the editor was like, okay, let's shift our focus to this instead. And then that's how we got the Yu-Gi-Oh! That we know now, and that's so fascinating. When we think about anime, does that really happen where the audience has much input on what happens? Not really. But in manga, you live or die by if people are reading your stuff, which I know makes sense. But that's kind of the context that the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga was going. It was made to entertain first, not to sell product. It was made to entertain. And I think looking at it through that, it automatically, I think, stands above the other Yu-Gi-Ohs for the fact it's not a commercial. Just on that premise of it alone. Though my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh thing ever is still the Arc 5 anime manga, but that's more of a bias. But I do agree again with Dylan that the manga, the original, is objectively the best. And you can really see Takahashi's passion. He put his heart and soul into these pages. And when you think about how many hours, he almost was in the hospital multiple times. He was sick, especially during the final arc.
Yep.
When you think about that, and I'm sure obviously the anime staff were probably under similar strict conditions, especially because Yu-Gi-Oh is notoriously difficult and expensive to animate. Like, Dark Side of Dimensions looks as good as it does because Konami put a lot of money into it.
Yeah.
And it made probably a decent amount of money back, right? But if you really think about it, it's a labor of love from a small group of people who were just meant to tell a good story and entertain millions, which they did. And that's beautiful to me. I absolutely love it. And I think the work, if you have not read the Yu-Gi-Oh manga before we start talking about specifics, do yourself a favor and please go read it. If not just a tribute to Kazuki Takahashi himself, but to the wonderful thing that started the series that we all love so much. It's a beautiful piece of art, and the stories touch my heart multiple times, and I'm sure I'll get into some of those moments when we talk about specifics later.
Yeah, I mean, and just to go off of what Rarity said, if you have not read the manga of Yu-Gi-Oh! And maybe you've seen the anime, and even if you were lukewarm on the original series and you didn't really love it like the anime, I definitely implore you to read the manga, because the manga, the best way that I describe it to people is it's almost like a best of highlights of what the anime was, right? Like Battle City is my favorite arc in Duel Monsters. There's no interruption like you have in the anime with Noah's Virtual World, which I still think was a crazy decision on their end. You just get Battle City through and through in a pure form, exactly what it was meant to be. You get Duelist Kingdom, and then right when Battle City ends, you don't have the Doma arc, you don't have the Kaiba Corp Grand Prix, you go right into like the Millennium World, and it's like, and then of course you have 59 chapters of storytelling with the characters that you're all familiar with. And if you've seen Season 0, Season 0, besides the addition of Miho, is which, she was not really relevant at all in the manga, is pretty accurate, but I'd say that's still, like, I feel like the manga does just encapsulate the story better than Toei's Season 0 does, as well as Studio Gallup's Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters does. It's kind of just hard for me to explain that, but you don't have to worry about filler. I think the Dungeon Dice Monsters arc is much better in the manga with
Duke
they
and
his
butchered
father. There's just a lot that the manga does really, really well that the anime kind of just, and the anime's got some great moments as well, but like the manga is like a highlight reel of what the anime is, and the manga is exactly the way that the story was supposed to be told. And there are major differences, and I definitely implore you to read that. I mean, it would be like if My Hero Academia's anime just said, all right, let's start at episode or chapter 50. Let's just start the anime at chapter 50, which is crazy. I mean, you never, I don't know any, I'm sure there have been series, but you never hear series starting their animated shows in the middle of the manga. I mean, there were 59 chapters that just got completely wiped, which is crazy.
And you think about it, the character development is lost.
Right,
like
exactly.
Kaiba. Like, if you guys don't know, we're going to probably get into spoilers now, so if you've not read anything, please turn away from this, or unless you just don't care. Kaiba at the beginning of the manga was a menace. Like, his brother even, like, calls him a demon. He's an irredeemable person. Not just a spoiled rich kid who's a bit of a jerk with a chip on his shoulder. Oh, no. He is sadistic. He is a psychopath, just like all the other villains in Season 0.
Yeah.
Slash the original manga, I should say, at the beginning. And especially the Def T arc. The fact the Def T arc is, like, they tried to condense, like, the theme of it into the first episode. No. Doesn't work that way. Like, you don't know that we thought that Honda was dead for a while. People forget that. And then it comes back later in Duelist Kingdom, where he's like, I want to save Mokuba. Like, in the anime, it's like, okay, he's a good person, but why? In the manga, because Mokuba saved him in Def T.
Right.
Like, there's these little contexts, or like the reveal of Shoddy in Pegasus's castle. The manga makes such a big deal of that because, well, he appeared early on, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's the guy who tried to kill me with the Millennium item, right? But in the anime, he hadn't shown up yet.
Yep.
So, like, it was like, who's this guy? I'm sure he's important later, but who are you? Like, it's these little details and these little
in
bits.
the anime.
Or even Joe Nochi especially. I know the anime like does little flashbacks, about his like development, but his friendship with Yugi, well, it's obviously great in the original anime, and they added a lot of stuff for Joey and Joe Nochi. I apologize if I use sometimes English or Japanese names.
That's fine.
I swear that I know the ones, even though sometimes the English translation uses the dub names, like they call Ishizu in the Viz translation Ishizu, even though it's Isis, blah, 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 It's a weird thing with the translations. We all know about how that works. But even thinking about Jonochi, like, you get to really see him beat up Yugi. Like, I know the anime, like, does, like, little flashbacks to the Ushio thing, but, like, you get to see it and his development of really becoming Yugi's friend and how that, like, that unity and people coming together and that kindness. And then Atem, oh my gosh, Atem with the full context that like his darker side could have been a side effect of Zork, or just maybe like him forgetting that his like powers were supposed to be used for good. All of that stuff you lose the context of. Or even Anzu. A lot of people, and I know you've said this, Dylan, before, a lot of people I think like kind of based on the anime at least don't think Anzu's a very good character. In the manga she's great. Because, you know, I think the standards of duelists and girls in Yu-Gi-Oh! Hadn't been established yet, but I think she plays her role extremely well in the manga as being a voice of reason, a big sister figure, a motherly character. And she's a great, like, one of my favorite moments, which the anime did really well, was when she tells off Kaiba in Duelist Kingdom. After that, like, you go, girl, you tell him. That's one of the only times you really see Kaiba, like, personally get struck. Because she's right. And the dub does a really good version of it too, even though it's very different, but that's about the anime. We'll probably do a video on the 4Kids dub at some point, because there's some gems in there, despite the fact it's a completely different thing.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I mean, like, that's the thing. You know, the 59 chapters that we lose out on with the anime, and a lot of people, you know, there are people that have obviously seen Season 0 and Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, but I would argue that probably over 80 to 90% of people have only ever seen the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime, and they think that the show, or they think that that story starts at episode 1 where, Kaiba, right, they do try to rush Death T, because that duel doesn't happen the way in the manga that it does in
Not
episode 1 of Duel Monsters at all, because it happens at the end of Death T, the famous Exodia scene, where they try to, like, make that all condensed, and they think that that's where the characters all meet each other for the first time, but as you said, it's just not the case. So
like,
the manga gives you a much better way to follow the characters. You also had Bakura have the I can't remember what the name of that arc was in the beginning of the manga.
The shadow, it was like it's not the Shadow RPG is the last one.
Oh, was it the
first
Monster World? Was that
Monster World, yeah.
The Monster
like
World arc, and that's your introduction to Bakura, so that when you see him then in Duelist Kingdom, it's like, oh, well, I know who this guy is, but they tried to introduce him as well as they could, but like, you just lose out on a lot of backstory in the anime, whereas in the manga, that's all there through and through, and there's no interruption in Battle City, and which is obviously a huge pet peeve of mine, clearly, but but it's just the story, I think, flows a lot better in the original manga for that reason.
And while I do love a lot of the duels they added in the anime, like Jonochi versus Yugi,
yes.
I love the Jonochi versus Kaiba duel a lot. I love that one. They added a lot of stuff for Jonochi and Kaiba they added, which makes sense. They're the other two, you could say, besides Yugi and Atem, the main characters, right? So they added a lot for them, which I do appreciate. Especially, most people I'm sure they all know this about me. I'm a Kaiba Brothers stan. I love them, which the manga makes me cry. Like, because Kaiba was a terrible brother. And then when you see him, he gets into a coma, right? His heart shattered. And the first thing he does when he learns his brother's kidnapped, he zooms out to go get him. That's a complete 180 of a character development. Because if you see the anime, you don't really know that. Like, that he was a terrible person who took his brother for granted, and that Mokuba made the pendants not as the key to Kaiba Corp, but just as a way that even after all the terrible things, he released a penalty game on his own little brother. And Atem had to save him.
In Death T,
But, like, you get this whole development, and especially as someone who loves Kaiba and Mokuba so much, especially because I see some resemblances to, I'm a younger sibling myself, so I can see kind of the protective older, one of my older sisters, I very much see as a protective older sibling figure, like Kaiba. And just that, it's so good. And even when you think about all the foreshadowing, because I'm not really sure how much of the, the Egyptian Millennium World Arc was planned in terms of, like, everything. I know Duelist Kingdom sets the seeds for it, Battle City does too, and then you get the full thing later. But there's all these little details that you can think about that you get lost on. And we're not trying to crap on the anime here. The original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime is also a work of art. It's just very, very different. Like, its OST is incredible, its voice acting in every version is great. And it's got a lot of great anime original content. Unlike you, Dylan, I actually like the No arc, actually. I don't think it should have been placed there, because I agree with you, but I really like that arc. But again,
I dislike the placement more than the arc itself, if that...
Fair enough. I like the deck monster system, and I love that Noah was basically a reference to Manga Kaiba with the green hair, even from Season 0. Very good. He's even wearing the same outfit, which is pretty great. But yeah, so again, I implore you guys to please read it or reread it if you haven't read it in a while. There's actually been some interesting changes since the original printings. Like, for example, I can point these out to Dylan, so maybe he can put them in the video somewhere. Like the original panels, you know when Kaiba sees the vision of Priest Seto and Kasara, right, for the first time during his duel with Isis, right?
Yep.
The original manga had the older design, but newer printings have the correct Priest Seto design, actually. The one that was developed later. In the reprinting, especially I think the recent digital color releases, which were only in Japan, have that as well. When you even think about that, I want to talk about the Millennium World Arc at the end, especially because there's a lot of interesting history with that, because that's my favorite arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you guys didn't know, for the original run. Which is funny because it's the one without the card games in it, but that's why I like it, because it's different and it's risky, especially when the card game was what I think helped excel Yu-Gi-Oh's manga's popularity, and then he just for an entire arc wasn't doing it. That's incredibly risky for any mangaka to do.
Yeah, I mean, for those that are either watching or listening that don't know, obviously when Yu-Gi-Oh started with the manga, I'm sure most people know this by now because so many, anime YouTubers have done videos on this, but it obviously started as a game. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh was not meant to be just a card game. It was a bunch of different games of darkness, and you see that in the manga. You see that as well in Season 0, all these different types of games or penalty games or whatever they are that the characters play. And then, of course, the card game is what a lot of people were writing about and sending to Takahashi that they wanted to see more of, as Rarity inferred earlier. And then, of course, that's when in Duelist Kingdom and Battle City, we got the game to be really the only focus, where you really never saw any of the other games again. And I do think that's a credit to Takahashi, because I do agree with you, Rarity, that his vision was probably a lot different when he first started that manga, and then when he saw the way that the fans were perceiving it, and that probably the executives then got their hands involved and said, hey, we think this card game element could be really, really popular. Like, let's make that the focus. He probably had to change a lot of story elements, and the manga still ended up being as good as it was, which I think is just a testament to his flexibility and his way to write a story. But like that was a really interesting arc, the Millennium World, because, as you said, that's after the card game was established. He kind of went back to the roots of Yu-Gi-Oh, where there was barely any dueling for a very long period of time, which is probably what he wanted the whole story to be, honestly, because that's how Yu-Gi-Oh was when it first started.
Yeah. And I even think about, in case you guys don't know, Goosey Takahashi, most mangaka, by the way, just a thing, manga's very hard to make. And a lot of mangaka in Japan, especially those who do the weekly format, which if you've been reading manga, you kind of know that weekly releases are slowly fading out of popularity to monthly or bi-weekly or bi-monthly releases. And that's because a lot of mangaka experience bad health. We recently lost the mangaka for Berserk. I know the creator of Hunter x Hunter is currently sick. And Goosey Takahashi, well, he didn't pass away of illness. He passed away saving someone, but he was in the hospital when he was designing Zork in particular, if you actually didn't know that. Yeah. And he actually apologized for why it looked wonky in the first printing. He was probably losing blood when he was drawing that. But think about that. He was drawing this thing for us to enjoy when he was close to death.
Yeah.
He's not the only mangaka who's done this. Luckily, nowadays, mangaka taking hiatuses is a lot more commonly accepted in Japan, but back in the day, especially, well, Takahashi was pretty big by this point, but that generally wasn't a thing. That's why assistants are needed, because one person can't do all that work. And that's impossible. Yeah. That's why assistants and other people are needed. But when you think about that, and he was basically forced to rush the endings. I also know the ratings were lower because, the card games weren't there. And there was supposed to be... funny enough, the Priest Seto was supposed to betray the Pharaoh. We're supposed to have 3 different factions, the Zork people, the Pharaoh's group, and then Priest Seto kind of on his own, right, with Kasara. And that was his original intent, which makes a lot of sense when you look at the battle that was prescribed between the Pharaoh and Priest Seto in the flashbacks in Battle City, right? That scenario makes a lot more sense. When we met Priest Seto, we're like, oh, he's kind of like Kaiba, but he's kind of a noble guy. He's not an enemy. And at the end, he's not, because he has to get possessed to make that fight work. Because the character that Takahashi wrote wouldn't betray the Pharaoh like that. So they basically had to mind control him, basically, which I think leaves some of the impact of that iconic battle a little bit by doing that, which I'm not going to fault Takahashi on that. That was probably just not a decision that wasn't his original intention. But yeah, we even think about the results of that. And I don't know if you believe this, Dylan, I'm 1,000% sure the Yami Bakura and Little Yugi duel in the Millennium World Arc was not planned. I'm pretty sure it was kind of something I had to force in there. I don't think that was planned at all, because it's kind of a side thing. I know it's supposed to build up Yugi as a duelist before he fights Atem, which is great, but it just seems so out of place in that arc in particular.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't really fit the rest
arc,
of it.
That was the only duel.
Besides the final one, of course.
Besides the final one, yeah, besides the ceremonial battle, which, that being said, I could see what you're saying. I actually never thought about it like that, to be honest, but that being maybe forced because they wanted, obviously, the card games to be a part of it, and the fact that it's towards the end of the arc, so maybe, like, the first half, the ratings were down, which they were. You know, we know that for a fact, probably because of the lack of card games. So for the fact, it's not hard to think that somebody above said to him, hey, like, make sure you add a duel into this arc because, like, ratings are down or sales are down. And so then he adds in that duel. He gets Bakura to, like, I could definitely see what you're saying there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What you think?
It's a great duel. Like, he made it work for the story. Like,
no, I love
great
that
to
duel.
see it's great. But it doesn't feel as naturally organic as I think the rest of it, because he also did his homework on Egyptian lore. Like, the Ka and the Ba is real stuff for, like, he portrayed Egyptian culture very faithfully. Obviously with the twist of the magic and stuff, but you could tell he did his research, and he was really interested since, you know, Shadi shows up pretty early on in the original manga as well. So this ancient Egyptian thing was always supposed to be a part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the fact we got to really see that whole thing, instead of just having the card games the whole series, I loved we got to see that. Not only because I'm always a fan of historical stories, you know, of like kings and political battles and magic and stuff. I'm all about that stuff.
Yep.
So that was obviously really cool to see in an actual Yu-Gi-Oh thing. It's also just really cool for them to... I love that Takahashi really put in the detail to make sure, like, for example, that the pharaoh had the right skin color when he was in his own body. You wouldn't... Like, and his character design drastically changed. If you don't know, manga rarely change character design. Like, I remember when Akira Toriyama, who's the mangaka of Dragon Ball, when he wanted to age up Goku, his editors were against it. Because changing up the main character design is very risky. And I guess I know Yugi was in the original Millennium World Arc, he's there, but, like, Atem looks completely differently. He's a completely, like, he doesn't have his signature stuff. Been the story of the Dark Magician Girl's origins. Oh, I talk about Kisara. Love her. The fact that the Blue Eyes White Dragon is this, like, really calm and sweet and loving girl who just wanted to save someone. Oh, my heart. Oh, I'm sad they didn't get more development, which Takahashi wanted to give them more. Which I'm like, you were so close to giving us more hardcore romance in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah. And it was taken away. And I'm so sad.
Yeah.
It was so
good. But, you know, it's just that whole end when he was sick. You know, it's like, what if?
The fact we got something.
He wasn't.
The fact we got as good of what we had.
Or he was able to take a hiatus.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think, though, that it's very fitting that the last arc of the manga is basically a big game of D&D. Because a lot of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga's ideas were inspired by the games that Takahashi, specifically D&D, he would play with his friends. And plus it makes sense because we know Bakura's first appearance was basically a game of D&D, so why not end it that way? As the last Shadow game. It makes thematic perfect sense.
Yeah.
As to do it like that. And again, the art, the art is beautiful. It's, especially the Millennium World Arc in particular, because he had to draw a ton of monsters on screen all the time. Or on the page, rather. Oh, and his panel layouts. I don't know how familiar you are with how manga works in terms of production, Dylan, and how things are paneled. One of my best friends, Penspark, or no, it goes by JL Arts 55, is studying manga, and him and I have talked a lot about how Goosey Takahashi is a master of paneling, and how he gets you to want to keep reading. And it's not just because, oh, this is Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to see how it is. Oh, no. Like, it's the way that the panels are designed to catch your eye, catch your attention. And it's so powerful, because the thing about manga is that you can tell the story without words. You could just read it and probably get a good general gist of that. And it's incredible. I think about how much hours and time over the course of this entire series that people spent working on this. And this was before computers, guys. The screen tone, everything was done by hand. Isn't that insane to you?
It is.
Like,
I mean, what were some of your favorite favorite panels, like your more memorable ones?
I do. One of my favorite panels, which I'm gonna send you as we're talking so you can see it and probably flash it on screen, is it's one of the pages where Kaiba, during the duel with, I think I brought this one up earlier, the duel with Isis, when he sees the Blue Eyes White Dragon in the flashback, right? It is so powerful because there's not really much dialogue on the page, but the way that it's framed, I'm trying to get it for you so I could put it in here. The way that it's framed really gives you this sense of like anxiety, and you can kind of see the panic in Kaiba's face as you see like these little panels, right, of all of this like the little flashbacks, right? The anime did this really well too, with like, you know, having the tablet kind of flash on screen little bit by little bit, right? And it's because of that, I think, that makes it super, super cool. I'm trying to find it. Now I can't find it, but damn it, I can't find it. I love that page a lot. I also love the reunion between the Kaiba brothers and Duelist Kingdom, because what's really interesting is Takahashi has two different ways of drawing pupils. Sometimes he just draws, you know, the closed circle, right? And then he draws it with like the line in the middle. And for Kaiba, he's done both. But for Kaiba in particular, when he comes out of the jail cell, right? Mm-hmm. He looks really lifeless, like he's dead. And then once he sees Mokuba, his eyes go back to the usual circles, and they hug, and it's absolutely beautiful visual storytelling. You can just immediately feel the connection between these two. Like, I think I have some of those that I've managed to find in my files. Like, look at that visual storytelling. He sees his brother, he looks dead, then they get to see each other, and then he has the eyes of the pupils. That's visual storytelling to tell you that this guy is woken up.
Yep.
And they see them hug, and the puzzle of the heart, all of that stuff. Their reunion in the anime is beautiful. But this is visual storytelling. Because that's the thing. Manga and anime are two different mediums. And adapting manga into anime is very hard. It's not just recreating the moments or the panels. The pacing's entirely different. I can tell you that as someone who's fan-dubbed the manga itself, I've dubbed the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga once, and the Arc 5 manga, obviously, it's very different. The pacing of a manga is completely different from the pacing of a TV show. And there's a lot of little moments they added because they probably had to for pacing, because, you know, a reader might... What works in books may not always work in animation, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But those are some of my favorite moments. Also, a lot of the pages with the god cards are always beautiful. A lot of the Blue Eyes stuff, always love seeing Blue Eyes around. Those are some of my favorite moments, but I just love the visual storytelling of the manga especially. And I'm very sad that the digital ebook colored versions that Japan got, we still haven't gotten, because Viz Media apparently doesn't want money. Because they would make so much money if they sold these in English.
Yeah, I think they would.
But I think part of the reason I heard is because the original Japanese copies of the manga have been updated a little bit, and that would require them to retranslate the entire thing. So they probably don't want to do that. There's been
for
some
me,
slight changes.
my favorites were always just... I felt like every time the gods were on the panel, I mean, he would always make it feel like a big deal. Like, whether it was Ra, Slifer, Obelisk, like, the aura that they had on the panels was great. And then my favorite character by far, seeing him, probably because I just love the character in both iterations, was Yami Marek. I feel like the way that he was able to draw Yami Marek so consistently demonic looking, and I feel like he was even more like demonic looking in the manga than he was in the anime more consistently. Which might be hard to believe for people that never read the manga, but like I'll probably have some panels up, but like the way that he was just shown off in the manga was one of my favorite character portrayals probably ever.
Like the facing, like the part where he does the stretching screen, that wasn't just an animation thing. They did that in the manga too.
No, that was in the manga. Oh yeah, I actually have that one up.
You look distorted. No. You look like you start getting kind of sick because you're like, it portrays that feeling of, ugh, this guy is pure evil, this monster. And that's something that, not to say animation obviously can't do, but there's something about the fact that manga relies on still frames. You're basically forced to absorb every single little detail of a still frame. And really what the angle does and how it directs your eye.
But it's crazy how well he was able to draw him throughout the entire manga.
Yeah, exactly. And the assistants who helped out as well. I wish we knew like which assistant worked on what. It's the same thing with animators, right? Like you don't always know which animator worked on what scene or which animation director, right? Which is why I'm thankful the channels nowadays are being able to point that out to us, those with really trained eyes. Because these artists and the people, like, they're incredible people. And everyone who creates stuff, and like I said, there's a reason why the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga, I've actually met some fans who were primarily manga fans, and how they're not a big fan of the anime because of all the changes, and that's so wild to me in terms of like, you don't really see that in this fandom in particular, but, and I know we kind of say there's a lot of DM fans who never continued on the past point, and I think if you read the manga that makes a lot of sense because it's its own product. It's very much not a story of children's card games. It was a story of unity, of games, and how it can bring people together, and about, you know, morality, and how that when we stick together, we can get through anything. And that message is so powerful, especially for what's been happening in the world the last few years, especially. And that's what I really want to appreciate in terms of, you know, this is appreciating Yu-Gi-Oh, right? We got to talk about appreciate. I appreciate all the hard work that went into it. All the struggles that to bring this story to people, and that Yu-Gi-Oh brought people together like Takahashi wanted with the way he wrote this manga. And I think it's really sad that a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh fan base, more towards, I guess, say in the card game realm, there's a lot of arguing, there's a lot of negativity, right? Or even just someone's in the anime community as well. And it's sad because that's not what Yu-Gi-Oh was made about. It was about bringing people of different views together to coexist and compete in, you know, clash of souls, right, on an evil playing field. And it's kind of sad that, and not just think about the world today is feeling a lot more sadder, which is why I always appreciate your positivity, Dylan. You very much are like me in that respect, and that's why we get along really well and we're friends. But just, I think like Takahashi's words are more powerful today than I'd say they were back in the day. Not that they weren't, but I think they resonate a lot more with today's people, especially.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've always tried to be more positive because, you know, I think that's just the kind of story that Yu-Gi-Oh tells. I think a story of unity. I know friendship is the big one, and the manga, I think that's definitely more kind of in your face of a theme, and I think that is definitely one of the many themes of the story. But I think my greatest appreciation is the adaptability. The fact that, you know, when he started this manga, it was a multiple games manga. Yu-Gi-Oh was not supposed to be this card game. And the fact that he was able to adapt the story to what people at the time really wanted to see. Well, I know others probably look at that as a negative because it's like, oh, you know, he wasn't able to tell the story he wanted to tell, which I get. Like, they're not wrong in thinking that. But, like, I also just give him so much respect that, like, he wasn't like, all right, you know what? No, I'm not conforming my product to this. He was like, okay, you know what? This is obviously what people want to see. I'm going to give the people and the fans what they want to see, and I'm still going to tell the story the way that I am able to tell it. And, you know, that's exactly what he did. And even though, you know, he may not, you know, there's conflicting rumors whether he wanted the series to go on into GX and 5Ds and Zex.
Yeah.
You know, I've read so many different things at this point, and I don't even know what's real and what's not real. But I do know this. He was always very supportive of those shows, and he was always very supportive of the franchises that followed after Duel Monsters, whether it was working a little bit on GX, doing a character design in Zexal, sharing a picture of a Vrains-related cake when episode 1 aired. He was always very supportive of it, and I think that just speaks to the kind of person he was, and that he knew that if there were people out there that would enjoy these products including the people that wanted to see him go the way that he did with the manga, where he made it more of a card game-based manga, that it was a good thing, and it wasn't a bad thing. And he very well could have looked at it the other way, that like, oh, they're milking my product for another show. But I feel like he always, in his heart, appreciated these new products because that's just the kind of person he was.
And appreciated the story and all the people who worked on them.
Yes.
He was always supportive. And that's the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh that I love. Yu-Gi-Oh, you wouldn't think that a story about what people like to resort it down to, a story about children's card games and, you know, which I love, like, the memes and stuff too. Don't get me wrong, I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh fan after all, but the fact they've been able to make 8 shows, and then I guess you could kind of consider the OCG structures kind of in there as another separate entity altogether. But so many stories, the lore of the cards that started with Takahashi giving stories to like the Dark Magician and the Blue Eyes, right? Like, we have official lore mangas now. We have the lore in Master Duel. Think about that. Like, the stories behind the cards mattering. And so many stories, so many fans have tried to make their own Yu-Gi-Oh stories or things like D&D campaigns based off of Yu-Gi-Oh. I've done that with friends before. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh is a great thing. And if he wasn't so open-minded, I suppose, about that, like what you were saying, Dylan, I don't think we'd get all the beautiful stuff we'd have later. And bringing, again, these people together and all the fan works I've seen, like, everyone who creates something for Yu-Gi-Oh! Or discusses Yu-Gi-Oh! Plays the card game, we're all connected because this story that was started by one man's passion brought us together. And I really, really am appreciative of that. Because Yu-Gi-Oh!, I'm pretty sure you've said this before, has changed my life. It's brought me some of the most incredible friends, kind of like Yugi. You know, I'm getting emotional. I'm thinking I'm trying to say this. Oh my goodness, I wasn't preparing to cry today. But it's true. I'm emotional about this series about children's card games. And it brought me, like, my best friends, people I consider family. And I've even, like, brought together people that I never even knew. And brought me some incredible experiences. And yeah, some of the shows or some of the stories, even the original manga, I think has some aspects that I'm not the biggest fan of personally, that I think maybe the anime did better. Like, for example, I really like the fact that Kaiba dueled Joey after Battle City. I like after that battle for the 3rd place. I like that. The manga wasn't in that. I liked that. I like some of the extra, like, little story bits, and things like that. But it's just, we all started from this place, and I really hope that this video, as well as the future videos that we plan to make, can really show the appreciation for this franchise that we all love so much, and how it means so much to different people. I encourage you all to share your stories in the comments about reading the manga. Have you ever read it? Do you want to read it? What has it done for you? And even just about Yu-Gi-Oh in general. I really can't wait to read these comments and respond to you guys, because I plan to be in the comments as well, and just hear all your stories, because that's what Yu-Gi-Oh did. It was a story that brought people together. And I know that it's done for so many of us. Kids, adults. I know there are people who had children now sharing Yu-Gi-Oh! With their kids. That's crazy to me, right?
Yeah.
That they're sharing it with their kids. Like, I hope one day I'll be able to share Yu-Gi-Oh! Definitely will with my kids. Hopefully one day when that happens. Of this incredible story. Like one of my half brothers, my stepbrother. I have a lot of siblings. I found Yu-Gi-Oh cards in his room, and we started talking about the original stuff. Like, I've never been able to talk about nerd stuff most time with most people that I know, because I'm just pretty much a nerd who likes very specific niche things. But they know what Yu-Gi-Oh is,
right?
And that's great. They know who Yugimoto is. They know who Seto Kaiba is. Like, think about that. What I love, they would know who Yuya Sakaki is, right? Like, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, but I think that's to show the recognizable appeal. Like, when Yu-Gi-Oh was in its heyday, it was up there with things like One Piece and Naruto. Guys, it was in, like, the big 3 at the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Yu-Gi-Oh was everywhere. Yeah. And not just, like, the fact of, like, you know, the card game did really well in the West. In Japan, it was a phenomenon. And it still is. And the fact, like, they're still making DM merch to this day, obviously merchandise is a whole other question, but the legacy of these characters that Takahashi made, and characters that we know have either been inspired, like, you can't tell me that Reiji Akiba wasn't partially inspired by somewhat of Kaiba. There's too many similarities there, which is why I think Reiji's a really good character. But, like, there's all these homages and references and things like that, and it's just, which they deserve to be. I know a lot of people maybe not like references, but I like them because it shows that you care. about the thing that came before you.
Yeah.
And in homages, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I'm thankful that we have people in this community like you, Dylan, who continue to talk about everything Yu-Gi-Oh. You know, your channel is Yu-Gi-Oh Everything, right? You talk just about everything to do with it, and I've always appreciated you for that. And I'm very honored to get to come with you for talking a little bit about just this series that we all love so much. I guess I have a question for you. What are some of your favorite moments? Because you asked me. What are some favorite moments that you have? Or maybe in memory or whatever. What do you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think so. My memory probably, when I think of the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga, and thank you for the kind words as well. And if you're watching, by the way, please feel free to comment down below what the original manga means to you, franchise means to you, you know, whatever you want regarding Yu-Gi-Oh. I think for me, it was more bewilderment when I learned, when I was probably like 17, 18 years old, that there was like a whole pre-story to Yu-Gi-Oh that was not animated. And I remember when I read that, I did like a triple take, and I was like, excuse me? Because my whole life, I thought that Yu-Gi-Oh, the story of Yu-Gi-Oh started with Kaiba walking into Grandpa Moto's card shop, and like that's what started it. And then when I learned that there was a whole season 0, which I was unfamiliar with at the time, and then the manga, I was like, okay, I got to read the manga from the start. And I was just bewildered, having only seen the English dub at that point, just how like mature the themes were, how brutal some of the panels and stories were, especially
it was not for
Yu-Gi-Oh.
kids. It was not for kids, man.
No, it wasn't.
Not.
It wasn't. And now at that point, I was like, I think I was either 17 or 18, so I was old enough. You know, good thing I didn't discover it when I was like 11 or 12. But like, I was just completely bewildered, almost with my jaw dropped, reading the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga all the way up until, you know, Duelist Kingdom, because I was just stunned at how different it was from the English dub, let alone, of course, the sub. And so, yeah, that will always be my memory with the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga, just bewildered at how different it was. Absolutely bewildered.
For me, I think it was just, like I talked about before, the experience of reading it, the characterization, the whole story, and even things that the original anime had to censor. Because that's what people... There's some things you can't even have on Japanese TV. Of course, 4Kids, basically, if you don't know, the decision wasn't necessarily by the company. It was also what the broadcasting channels wanted at the time.
Yeah, it was standards and practices.
Yeah, laws, right? So, like, but even Japan, like, I know some famous manga, like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which, if you didn't know, Yu-Gi-Oh was partially inspired by JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, if you didn't know that. Takahashi listed that as one of his inspirations for Yu-Gi-Oh. Like, got censored, like, I think there was one of the JoJo's, and the anime doesn't smoke, because smoking under, I think, 18 is illegal in Japan. Like, you couldn't even show that. And someone like JoJo, like, think about Yu-Gi-Oh! There's all these little things that even, what can be acceptable on Japanese television, even though we know anime today is very, very different. And, yeah.
Well, the one that sticks out to me, and that's because I recorded a short on it. I just have to edit it. It'll probably be up before this this comes out. But it was when Mai was defeated by Marek, and in the in the subbed version, you know, it's the sand with the hourglass. But in the manga, it's like flesh-eating insects that are in there with her,
gross.
and like that was one of the censorships from the manga to the subbed Japanese version. So like even little things like that is just crazy to think about what they did in the manga.
It's crazy, and I'm praying that somehow the manga dub project, I know you've made a short on this, that Eric Stewart and Dan Green want to maybe do. I am praying that happens, because like there's I'm not sure if you've talked about this on a short before, the uncut English dub that they were supposed to do. Oh yeah. Like, they should do that now. These actors are probably interested. Let them at least adapt the manga or the original anime. Let them get the chance to, because they're great actors. Like, I would love to see them adapt the full original story, whether it's the manga or the anime. Like things like that. There are so many things, I think, that, like, the fact that I don't think Yu-Gi-Oh has done, like, any big announcement since Takahashi's passing is really surprising. That, like, I know you were wanting, like, a Duel Links movie. There was the Duel Monsters reboot, you know, based on the manga rumors. You know all that stuff from Jump Festa. And while having more Go Rush is obviously great, because Go Rush is very fun, I really hope that at some point they will do some kind of, at least a kind of tribute to the franchise that us in the West can also participate in. Because Yu-Gi-Oh is a global phenomenon. Obviously, Japan's very important, is the base of it, but I would love to see that. Like, release the colored versions in America. I would buy them. And I really, really want to. They're beautiful and all of that. And I think some of the art books haven't been released. Takahashi's later art, I'm sure you've seen them on thumbnails before. They're gorgeous. He never stopped drawing. He never stopped loving these characters and the world he created. Like, he came back to do Transcendent Game, right? And he drew that manga.
Yeah.
For Dark Side of Dimensions, came back for that movie, which I'm sure that'll probably be one of our next episodes, if not, or that the anime. I think Dark Side of Dimensions makes a lot of sense because it's the sequel, but that was made in an entirely different context.
Well, Rarity, do you want to promote anything going on over at your channel? Obviously, guys, I'll have that link down below, so definitely give Rarity a follow. Heard she does some great stuff over there.
Hello. So I've recently come back. I've done a recent video on the new Cardfight Vanguard series, Divines, which just started on last Friday from the time of recording this. And I plan to do some more fun Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, any kind related videos. I would love to do a retrospective on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc-Fight manga at some point. I know Dylan will probably talk about it in this series at least at some point whenever we get all the way to there. But I'd love to bring back Luna Manga and maybe do a little podcast with you three, us three together, like we did before.
Oh, Luna, yeah, I'd be so down for that.
I'd have to contact her and see if we can get that going.
Yep.
But I would love to do that. Do some maybe fun tier lists, and well, a certain anime that I love is turning 10 this year, and there may be something for that in the works. But that's all I can say about that for now. Fun things are happening over on the Rarity channel, and I'm sure you'll be seeing me here either monthly or bi-monthly for this series as well. And I'll hopefully try to jump on one of your Master Duel streams, Dylan, so we can have some fun card games in action, with hopefully the game not crashing this time like it does when I fought you in Duel Links. Sorry about that.
No, that would be great. Very interested in what that 10-year project could be. So definitely stay tuned to Rarity's channel for that and a lot more content linked down below. Guys, I want to thank you all so much for jumping in and watching this video. We do plan to do this for a lot of the different Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows and mangas, whether it's Dark Side of Dimensions. I'm sure we'll touch GX 5Ds. You know, we'll be doing this hopefully monthly or bi-monthly. A long discussion, just doing kind of a deep dive into our thoughts on the different projects and stuff throughout Yu-Gi-Oh! I think this is going to be a fun thing that we do in the year 2024. Leave us all your thoughts down below on the original manga, what it means to you, and if you've ever watched it, if you've ever read it, or have plans to read it in the future, would love to hear those thoughts as well. Guys, thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the comments, and I hope you have
an amazing day.
Take care, guys.